Let's make compliance a mindset, not only a checklist. That would be not only a sentence, it's a mantra, even a survival kit for compliance. In this episode of the Compliance Coach, we are talking about the secret stuff, where normally compliance officer as well as the executive board members and relationship managers are thinking about in terms of how do we find the right balance between compliance on the one hand and business expectation and growth on the other. How can we protect a bank without eliminating the business in the private bank sector? That's what it's about, and here I think I call that the compliance equilibrium, and it's difficult to describe what it is, but I can tell you if we miss it, it's frustration, it is fight, it is friction, and normally between compliance and the business functions. So in this episode of the Compliance Coach, we are talking about of how we can resolve it, how we can fix it. Stay tuned until the end of the episode. My name is Ralf Ebert. I'm the Compliance Coach, 25 years of experience in the banking sector. I'm here to guide you thinking and impacting compliance differently. Welcome back to another episode of the Compliance Coach. Today we're talking about compliance equilibrium. No, it's not the new James Bond film, and it's not about a choice between regulation or growth, or control or client profitability, or risk management and client experience. It's at the same time holding both ropes in the hand and finding the right balance. And that is particularly important in private banking, where the kind of requests are sophisticated by more and more sophisticated clients, which are in multi-booking jurisdictions, which have complex structure, complex setups, and of course high expectation because there's a high market pressure in this regard. So the compliance equilibrium is then existing when you have one, compliance is really protecting the business and the institution. Two, business understands and manages its own risk. Very important point, we come to that later. And last but not least, we are coming back from this kind of rules base into a risk base and now into a fear-based approach. And if that's get eliminated, that's what I call the compliance equilibrium. Let's be very clear about one thing. We cannot achieve any kind of compliance equilibrium if we don't have a functional compliance culture. What is compliance culture? Compliance culture is not more policies, it's not more regulatory demand, it's not longer procedures, and certainly not a mandatory e-learning. Compliance culture is about behavior on both sides, business and risk, and the compliance function. Now, what does it mean? It means when front office is asking at a very early stage in the process, can we do this file? What do you think about this kind of client? If risk discussions are normal and not like very often threatening between functions, and that the can we is asked before the how fast can you get it. If we have that in place, then we can really talk about a compliance culture in the bank. Now, the compliance culture means as well a trusted relationships between the business and the compliance, but as well among compliance officers in the function as well, whether it's sanctions or anything else, very important. It means that it needs to be respected on both ends and of course protected, and it needs to be embedded in daily decisions, meaning in the governance model it needs to be having as well a role and tone from the top to be protected in that regard. And honestly, tone from the top is one of the key messages. If you don't have that, and that if compliance is fearing that any kind of the activity risks of being punished, then you're going exactly in the contrary. So compliance culture is the basis for the compliance equilibrium. I said that in the beginning. What does it mean as well? Compliance is not a checklist. It should be a mindset. And if it's a mindset, part of the cultural behavior of the bank, that means it should be not this kind of ticking the box exercise. I call it very often having the choice between a sleeping pill or an energy drink. What do I mean by that? Its sleeping pill is you tick the boxes that all risks are addressed, so you're fine and perfectly super nice. Auditors tell you it's wonderful, but in essence you did not address the problem. Now the energy drink is like going in the visionary approach by saying, how do I need to build a compliance in the business set up so that it's functioning, that decisions are taken, that everybody is engaged in the process, that we can deliver against timelines, but that the risk appetite is as well held. So checklist very often gives you a full kind of sense of security. Everything is working. That's not what you're searching for. You're searching really for a balance between compliance and the front, which at the same time protects the bank. And that is not just by imposing on a policy. That's a long procedure where you need to get the people around the table. And especially in private banking, the checklist will never cover client behavior, that suddenly they're changing their activities, they're changing their transactional behavior, and the all sorts of wealth scenarios that could achieve, from real estate sales, one-time cash liquidity events, and of course all the reputational risks that in particular in times of 2026, where the geopolitical tensions and the sanctions have a high impact, that is something that will impact. So we need people that can think and not just only process. That's what I mean by checklist versus mindset of compliance. Compliance equilibrium will need as well a new generation of compliance officers. Why is that so important? Because it's not only about interpretation of rules, policies, procedures, it's a part of the risk-taking process. And risk-taking process is not only taking the decision, it means as well the communication, meaning you have to have the regulatory expertise. You need to have a business understanding as such. What do we sell? What is our offering? You need to have a risk assessment skill. And how does the whole thing, the whole client element is put into the perspective of what we're doing? And last but not least, you need to be a very good communicator and influencer to a certain point of view, because your decision is not only taken by one person, but normally by committees. So what does it mean if we look in the private bank sector? It means that compliance officers will need to speak the language of the relationship manager. Very important. They need to understand client dynamics, how they behave, why they're doing this, what is different. And last but not least, they need to translate regulations into the practical guidance. What we can do, what we cannot do, if we cannot do it, why, if we can do it, what are the restrictions. Not this kind of black and white model in and out, but linear. It's just providing this kind of element. And if compliance only quotes circulars and articles, the business will quickly disengage. So in an essence, if compliance can explain why risk matters, how to mitigate it, and what is acceptable, then compliance becomes credible, and credibility, in addition to trust, that is part of compliance equilibrium. However, there is another model that we need to quickly put the lights on. It's governance. Why is that so important? And I have already highlighted that in one of the other episodes, is in terms of you can only have a functional compliance when it's rightly embedded in the setup of the entity where you're working for. You can have the best processes, you can have the best compliance model, you can have the best compliance officers. If they are not sitting at the right direction, if they don't have the push the button and the possibility in terms of making their voices heard, forget about that. So what does it mean? It needs to be independent, which sometimes is an issue. It needs to be properly staffed. Good luck with that in times of budget restrictions, market opportunities, etc. And it needs to be well represented at a decision level. It doesn't help if you're just a contributor, and some of the wonderful persons can then bring the decisions up in the committee. You, as a compliance officer, you need to sit in the decision level. Now, in a healthy governance model, how does it look like? It looks like that the compliance has a real voice when it comes to the onboarding and transaction processes, and it's not tick the box and just only a bypass. Number two is escalations are respected, and as I mentioned, not bypassed by any means. Thirdly, it does mean that the risk appetite, for instance, AML regulations, are clearly defined and not just put into a light of it could be. They need to be clearly written, and they need to be clearly applied in principle. Empowerment does not mean blocking business. It means challenging them intelligently. It means documenting decision and why we are coming to a conclusion. So if we're coming to a conclusion, even positive, what are the restrictions and how we can put them into the reality. It's as well sharing accountability, meaning it's not only that we can say it's a business decision and business is responsible. Both have a co-responsibility in this kind of model. So compliance equilibrium exists in the governance model if we have the compliance really in an advisory function, if business takes the decision based on the accountability of compliance, and if the governance model as such supports compliance but as well business. Now, compliance equilibrium means as well coming from attention into a dialogue context when it comes to business versus compliance. And meaning tensions are okay. It's like in a partnership. If you're always happy and say yes to the decision of your partner, certainly not something that your partner would like. No, they want to have a reliable partner that expresses as well his or her own important feelings or hear decisions. And the goal of an equilibrium between both functions is not to eliminate tension, it's to get the whole kind of discussion to a constructive dialogue where people are respected, but where both functions or even the other functions that are participating, they have the impression we are well trusted and we are part of that decision. Accountability, again, what we mentioned already beforehand. That means, however, compliance does as well need to understand better the business reality in terms of how to acquire a client, how difficult it is sometimes to get the information. It's not because you don't have the corroboration available in the moment when you're asking that, but only in 2 months later or after the account opening, that this is because the client wants to hide something. That's sometimes as well the mentality of the client, the ethnic and socio environment, etc. So we do not really need fights between compliance and business, but we need conversations. And that means really putting compliance equilibrium in action. That was it for this episode about compliance equilibrium. Now the 3 takeaways. Compliance equilibrium is a strategic choice, not just coming by accident. Culture will always beat procedures, and that every single time, regardless of what you're doing. Number 3 is skilled compliance officers create value and not obstacles. So we're going from the tensions into the communication. These would be my 3 takeaways when it comes to compliance equilibrium. Now go out and make compliance equilibrium happen. Thank you very much for listening to this episode. Compliance Coach is back again very soon. My name is Ralf Ebert. Let me know what you think. Don't forget to push the subscribe button for your feedback or anything else. Looking forward for the next episode, thinking and impacting compliance differently.